We have a PowerPoint presentation. May I now request our respected sir, Sri chabungbam sir, the Commissioner of Income Tax TDS NR, to please proceed with the presentation.
Being from the tax department, income tax department, I think it will appear not very good if I start telling you, all of you, why should we pay taxes? You should do this, you should do that, you should follow this, follow that. I think that is kind of lecturing. Today I'm not here to lecture any one of you. In fact, you already must be, otherwise, getting a lot of lectures here. So today is not an occasion for that. So I would like to approach this topic from another perspective, while trying to convey the same message. Instead of saying, or instead of talking about the importance of taxes, as Dr. Prabhakar had remarked, and very rightly so, why should we pay taxes? He said that, right, in his wonderful speech. He said he has been paying around 6 lakh rupees a year to the government of India as income tax. And he also said during his tenure here in the university, he has paid around 1 crore rupees. I mean, that's a huge sum of money. In fact, as a taxpayer, I also fall around that bracket. So I normally tell, my, friends that when they ask me how much tax you pay, I normally say, instead of quoting the figures, I say every year I give a small car to the government of India. So 6 lakh rupees or 7 lakh rupees, that will give you, I think, a medium-sized car, maybe. In 2 years, of course, you can give the government a nice SUV, I suppose. So that's what taxes are all about. Taxes are, a drain on your pocket. It's a huge chunk of money simply just taken away. The professor remarked that he gets only 10.5 months salary instead of 12 months salary, which is actually correct. This is this is how taxes are paid. Of course, he can blame his video for that, but then the video is simply doing its duties. So let us, while you enjoy your tea, please enjoy your tea as it's being served. While you enjoy your tea, let's try to address this question which Professor remarked. Why are we paying taxes? Why don't we just stop paying taxes? And if I stop paying taxes, for example, Professor now would have, more money in his pocket. Number one, no income tax. He also talked about the taxes that he's paying on so many other things. He mentioned GST, he mentioned, I think, vehicle tax and so on. So if there were no taxes, if there were no GST, for example, everything would be cheaper, right? In fact, relevant for all of us, including the students, because you see, all of us are taxpayers. In the sense that when we buy anything, when we buy, even this small bottle of water, this half-liter bottle of water, which costs us, I think, 10 rupees, if you see the level at the back, it's written maximum retail price 10 rupees. Then it's written in fine print, inclusive of all taxes, right? So that is where the tax component comes. So that way, whenever you buy anything, when you buy clothes, whenever you buy anything, any grocery item, whenever you buy food or your pencils and pens, whatever you use in your daily lives, you are also paying taxes, in the form of indirect taxes, GST and other things. Of course, when you fill petrol or diesel in your vehicles, you're paying a good amount of tax there. So what if there were no taxes? So that way, if there were no taxes, won't things be much better? Everyone will be richer. Everyone would be able to afford to buy more products, more goods and services. So the question I'm posing to the House is, if there were no taxes, would there be, bliss, paradise, something to really look forward to, that is utopia, perfection? Or on the other extreme, would there be chaos or anarchy? This is what we seek to discuss today. I already, I think, gave this warning before. I am repeating this warning that taxes are inherently a very boring subject. So, is tea being served for everyone? Okay. So please have your tea and try to feel awake. Of course, I will try to make my presentation less boring for you. This is me. Okay. Right. So you can see, IRS tag there, just beside my name. Are you familiar with IRS? I'm sure you are. Are you familiar with this IRS? Well, this fortunately is not a picture from India. It's a photo from America, from the US of A. So they are also our counterparts, who collect income taxes. They are also known as the IRS. In fact, they are known as the Internal Revenue Service. As you can see, they are not very popular. They are accused of having too much power and harassing people. Okay, as a professor remarked, the fee that you get
English
notices from the income tax department. So let me telling more about myself. Let me tell you a story. So if you can't read it, I'll read out for you. So once a child was playing with a coin, and then by mistake he swallowed the coin. So it was stuck in his throat. The mother, she panicked and she ran out to the street, and he was asking, yelling for help. And then this kind-hearted man, or rather a stranger, was passing by, and he said, "Don't worry, ma'am, I'll handle it." So he took the child, and then he, gently or a little bit harshly probably, hit the child on the back a few times, and then the child coughed the coin out. The coin came out. So the mother was very happy, and she said, "Thank you so much, doctor, you have saved my child." But the man said, "Ma'am, I'm not a doctor. I am from the IRS." So what is the moral of the story? Anyone? It's very simple, yes? Moral of the story is that wherever your coin is, whether it's in your throat or any other place, the IRS can take it out. So that's something about it. Alright, let's have another story. This will tell more about ourselves, more about us. So this is a setting in a hospital. So two doctors, they were looking for something, searching for something amongst the flower beds. Okay. So man, he saw that and was very curious, and he said, "Excuse me, doctors, can I help? Have you lost something?" And the doctor said, "It's okay. We are just doing a heart transplant for an income tax officer, and we want to find a suitable stone." So that means income tax people, their hearts are made of stone, right? Stone-hearted people. So that is why they keep sending you those nasty notices. So since we are talking about taxes, let's try to define tax. What is tax? This is the best definition that I've come across in my 20 years of service in the government of India. This is a definition attributed to Mark Twain. He said, "A tax is a fine for doing well, and a fine is a tax for doing wrong." So that means if you're paying taxes, some of you are, in fact all the professors are paying taxes, that means they are doing something right, you're doing something right. That's why you're paying taxes. If we are doing something wrong, you would be paying fines, right? So this is one way to look at it. Of course, here you would probably like to know the academic definition. So the dictionaries give that. Let me jump. The Oxford Dictionary, the Britannica, the Webster, the Collins Dictionary, and so on. Now all these definitions that you will come across, on the net or otherwise, or in the books, you'll see that there are three main components when you try to define tax. Three limbs. Number one, tax has to be, levied by the government under the authority of law. Number one. So that means, for example, some of the taxes that we are all familiar with, the taxes levied on, our national highways, by some organizations, they don't strictly, therefore, fall under the definition of tax, even though we refer to them as tax. Number one. Second point, taxes are generally on income and on goods and services. Third is very important. Taxes are levied for the objective of meeting certain public purposes. Okay? So, to delivery of public goods and services, that is the main purpose or objective of levying taxes. So, this is basically the definition of tax. I'm not going into this, direct taxes, indirect taxes, as I said, Right. So, I'm asking the question, or rather the professor was asking the question, why do we have to pay taxes, right? So, I'm trying to answer the professor, he's not here, but then some of you can brief him later. But to answer that question, we need to answer another question first. What is this concept of taxation, all about? I mean, how old is this concept or phenomenon? Is this a phenomenon which is a modern phenomenon, which was introduced recently or in the last century or otherwise? How old is taxation? Let's see that. Okay, so I'll just take you through history, and I begin with the Egyptian civilization. Okay, as you know, the Egyptian civilization was there around 3000 BC. Okay, that is where the pyramids were built. We all know that. So the first system of organized taxation in the world is traced back to the ancient Egyptian civilization. So there, taxes were imposed on harvest, on property, and so on. And one could pay taxes either in the form of grain. People are paying grains to the king, or taxes could also be paid in the form of labor. Right? This is the kind of punishment the Egyptians meted out for non-payment of taxes. Okay, so taxes built the pyramids. We now come to the Greek civilization. Now here, there is a very important lesson in history, okay, which I'll keep repeating in the course of my presentation. The lesson is that whenever there is war, the king was always compelled, I should say, to impose new taxes. So, for example, in the case of the Greek, ancient Greeks, the Athenians actually, for them fighting wars was like a lifestyle. They used to fight wars so frequently, but then fighting wars came at a great cost. So, in order to fund this war cost, in fact, they imposed taxes on the people, on everyone. They had a democratic kind of system of taxation. Okay, and then of course to enforce this collection of taxes, they meted out severe punishments, as you can see. Then we come to Rome, the Roman civilization. We've all read about the Roman civilization. Now the Romans had a slightly, one could say, excessive form of taxation. That is, they used to levy taxes on every head. So whoever has a head, all of us have heads, right? I don't see anyone without heads here. So if we were in the Roman times, the king would be imposing taxes on all of us. So it used to be called the head tax. Actually, the word census means counting heads, right? Counting the population. It came from the Roman word. The Roman authority who used to collect taxes, they were called censors. Anyway, so they used to impose taxes on everyone, and the taxes were very high. Another lesson we learn from history here is that if you impose too high taxes, then the economy, it has a negative impact on the economy. Okay, so in fact, this excessive tax burden, it led to the collapse of the Roman Empire eventually. This is the census I was talking about. So you can see, literally arm twisting there. This is how they used to punish, the defaulters. By the way, the income tax department doesn't punish tax defaulters like this, just to clarify. The Chinese, again, a very ancient and very advanced civilization, as we know. They also have some kind of a property tax. Okay. Then we come. This was the ancient history. Okay, before Christ. We come to the Middle Ages, Europe, China, places like Mongolia. Okay, they all have some form of taxes, some form of taxation systems. In England, during the Anglo-Saxon period. Okay, in the Middle East, Okay, this is where the rulers were, by religion Muslims, so they used to impose taxes on the non-Muslims. Okay, for example, interesting bit from history. This is during the Tang dynasty's rule in China. This is known as the golden period of Chinese history. Okay, this is the taxation in the ancient Mongol Empire. So here you can see this gentleman, nicely dressed up gentleman, on a horse, and his title was Darugachi. So he is in fact, supervising collection of taxes in a market. This is tax collection in England. Again, you can see harsh punishment, putting hands on burning charcoal. Okay. So if you don't pay your taxes, you burn your hand. This is probably how the expression came. I don't know. Anyway, another important lesson that I would like to share with you from history is with regard to the French Revolution. We've all read about the French Revolution in school. In French Revolution, before that, in France, the French society had three classes: the clergy, that is the priest, and then the nobles, that is the wealthy people, and the commoners, the armed army, as we call them in India, the bourgeois, as we call it in French. So now, very interestingly, the clergy and the nobles, they had a secret understanding with the king, whereby they told the king that, look, don't impose taxes on us and we'll allow you to rule, because they were very powerful, the clergy and the nobles. So as a result, there were no taxes whatsoever on the clergy and the nobles, and then the commoners were taxed very heavily. Okay. So as a result, the commoners, who were otherwise poor people, poor farmers and artisans, and trying to make ends meet, they became more impoverished. As a result, this unfair and lopsided tax system, it was resented by the commoners, and in fact, this was one of the prime causes why the French Revolution happened. So, for example, this picture shows, the nobles and the clergymen riding happily on the back of the common man. You can see another picture here. The common man is crushed under the weight of taxes, whereas the elite, they don't have any such burden. So ultimately, as I said, if you impose too high taxes on the people will revolt, and then you have an anarchic kind of situation like the French Revolution. This is one lesson in history. Alright, we now come to the colonial period, very interesting period. Why? Because you see, the European colonizers, they started colonizing, countries in Asia and Africa and even in America, including India, of course. So as a result, what did the colonizers, in fact, they started to transfer wealth from the colonies to their respective countries. So as a result, these Europeans, they became richer and richer, number one. Number two, in Britain, what was happening specifically in Britain, the British king, monarch, was at war with Napoleon of France. So as I said earlier, whenever there is a war, then there is a need for the king to impose new taxes. So here it was a situation where, on the one hand, the citizens, the Europeans were, getting richer and richer, having more money. So the king thought, he came up with this brilliant idea, I should say, that why don't we impose taxes on income? So this is how income tax, as we know it today, was introduced for the first time in the world in Great Britain in the year 1799. This is how it began. This is how we have been continuing this tradition here in India also. In America, we have all also read about America. In fact, I referred to the American War of Independence, rather than Independence Day, in my speech earlier. So why did the Americans revolt against the British? First, one of the prime causes was that the Americans were taxed by the king, the British king, but they were not allowed to send their MPs, the members in the British Parliament. So they had this slogan, and they raised this clarion call as to no taxes without representation. This became a big political movement and it was one of the prime causes why the Americans started fighting for independence, and they did achieve their independence in 1776, right? Then second aspect in America with regard to taxes is the American Civil War. So this happened about 80 years after they became independent. So as we know, the northern states and the southern states, they started fighting each other, right? We have seen all these movies and serials based on this civil war. So as I said again, I repeat the same thing. Whenever there is a war, there is a need to introduce new taxes. And in 1861, because of this civil war, Abraham Lincoln, the American president, had to introduce income tax in the United States of America. 1861. This is how it is. This is the thing. All right. So we have seen, how taxes have been there since the ancient Egyptian civilization and how they have been there till the modern times in the global context. Let's see in the Indian context. Okay, so before that, let me pose this question to you. The question I'm posing to you is, why don't sharks attack tax officers? My colleagues here from the department, Mr. Sasidanand is there. He is also one of the speakers and he will be making a presentation. He is like me, we are immune to attacks by sharks. If we come across any shark, they are very friendly to us. Can anyone guess the reason why? Yes? It's very simple. It's something that you will encounter in your, even in university or even otherwise. Professional courtesy extended by a shark to another shark. So a shark will never attack another shark, right? So the only difference is that we attack sharks, as as I think my colleague Damodar Chandra was saying, that I think he sent about 1,000 notices to people across the city or the state. So he is acting like a shark, I suppose, trying to fish for taxes. So that is why we are immune from things. So we come to ancient India. I was saying, ancient India, as I'm sure you must be aware, had an extremely well planned, in fact, a very modern kind of taxation system. This is exemplified by the fact that there are two ancient texts, the Manu Smriti, the laws of Manu, and the Arthashastra. Okay, Arthashastra. So these two texts contain, concepts which are so modern, in fact, which were so ahead of their times, that they have been adopted in the current modern taxation system of India. I'll give two examples. For example, in Manu Smriti, this was there contained therein, that it said, tax collection should be annual, okay, which we're doing now. That means, don't try to impose taxes so frequently. Let it be an annual exercise, something like that. It should be by reliable functionaries. Very important, because you see, tax is something to do with money, so it's very easy to get tempted, So it should be administered by persons of integrity. That is what it means. And taxation should be fair. This is there in Manu Smriti. Now in Arthashastra, any idea who wrote Arthashastra? Yes? Chanakya, Kautilya. Chanakya, also known as Kautilya. Okay, he was the what was he? He was, I think, the finance minister of the great Mauryan emperor Chandragupta Maurya. Okay. So in his treatise Arthashastra, he wrote, a tax collector should collect taxes from a taxpayer